Alright, welcome to my Bloodborne No Hunter's Dream guided walkthrough. Although, as far as this being a guide is concerned, looking back at my previous failed attempts, it is actually quite surprising that this turned out to be the successful attempt, because I screw up pretty hard at some places. Also, I sort of don't recommend actually doing this, because it's bad for your heart, let me put it like that. Regardless, I'm going to explain to you in detail what I did to get through this extremely tough challenge run, and also what I actually could have done better. So it may not be that big of a surprise, but there are very few gaming channels on YouTube who have covered this specific challenge run. Because like any hard reset run, you basically have to be insane to even attempt it. Well, at least you have to be an extreme masochist. So what is this run about exactly? Well, the challenge is to kill Mergo's wetnurse without ever visiting the Hunter's Dream. Because since the game has to end in the Hunter's Dream, you cannot complete the game without going there at all. But as you know, if you die or use a lantern to go to the Hunter's Dream for the very first time, there's this cutscene that plays where your character is lying on the floor, wakes up and the camera pans up to reveal the workshop. Now, as you know, after killing Mergo's wetnurse, the workshop is on fire. And here's the thing, if you manage to kill Mergo's wetnurse without ever having gone to the Hunter's Dream, then that cutscene will actually change. The workshop will in fact be on fire in that cutscene. So that is essentially the goal of this run, so to say. That's the reward in a sense, to see that particular version of the cutscene. However, that means that this run has some pretty severe restrictions. First of all, you cannot die, because dying will immediately transport you to the Hunter's Dream, so this has to be a no-death run. Secondly, you cannot get a starting weapon, so my first order of business is to make it to where the saw spear can be found. That will be my weapon for practically the entire playthrough with one small exception. Thirdly, you cannot level, because you have no access to the doll, so this is a blood level 10 character and will remain so for the entire playthrough. The fourth restriction is actually the worst one of all. You cannot upgrade your weapon. Neither with blood shards nor with blood gems. And that is ridiculously harsh, because that means you can only do shit damage. Or better said, you are completely dependent upon beast blood to do at least some sort of decent damage. The fifth restriction is no gun. There is no way to get a gun you can use. Well, technically the flamesprayer, but that's not really worth it. But of course the downside to no gun is that you don't have the ability to parry. Not that your visceral attacks would do decent damage anyway. And the final restriction is that you cannot use any of the shops, because those are inside of the Hunter's Dream. So you can't buy blood vials and you cannot get rid of your inside. So these are some pretty extreme restrictions, and it's also a hard reset run. Meaning that dying sets you all the way back. You have to start all over again with a new character. So in order to make it even manageable in the first place, for 3 of the bosses I will be using cheese tactics. Namely for the Gascoigne, because you want to be able to make it past them as quickly and easily as possible, as you will very likely have to reset your run over and over again. So the start of the run has to be easy and quick. And then the second boss to cheese is the One Reborn, because he has way too much health to make it manageable with such a low damage output. And the last boss that we can cheese is Micolash during his second phase. Unfortunately, all of the other mandatory bosses have to be done legitimately, as I'm not even aware of actual cheese tactics for those ones. But there are some helpful strategies that I will show you. So especially the shadows of Yharnam are an absolute nightmare on a run like this. At least they are for me. As you may know, on earlier versions of the game there was actually a glitch to make it to the shadows early in the game and have them being completely frozen, but that's no longer a possibility. So I just picked up the saw spear and the oil urns next to those crows, and of course a couple of blood vials on the way. As you would expect, knowing where blood vials can be found is very important, because you cannot buy any and you can't really risk farming them from enemies. Unfortunately, I screw up later on, and spoiler alert, there's actually a part in this run where I have to make do for a while without any blood vials at all. Mainly because I made some pretty big mistakes in the forest area. So when I get there and you are crazy enough to try this run yourself, please don't do as I do, but listen to what I say instead. So for the most part you don't want to fight against enemies, unless absolutely necessary or if they are guaranteed to drop blood vials. Now there is of course also RNG involved, For example, here on the bridge you are likely to get some blood vials, but how many or if any at all is in the end just a matter of luck. By the way, I don't plan on this being my only Bloodborne playthrough on my channel, given that this run only includes mandatory bosses and cheese tactics to make it manageable, so I probably will do a regular BL4 playthrough in the future, like I did for the other Souls games, where I include all bosses, the DLC, and perhaps even the challenge dungeons, at least to an extent. I actually got pretty lucky here and I got an extra oil urn as a random drop, because those are going to be an actual lifesaver against Rom the Vacuous Spider. But that's a boss for later. First there's Father Gascoigne, and we're going to use the very well known staircase trick to cheese him. As soon as the fight starts, lure the boss up the stairs, then run past him to get to the other side. This way the boss will get stuck behind the railing and you can use charged R2 attacks from the transformed version of the Saw Spear to hit him, while there being little chance of getting hit yourself. Because you're not 100% safe. You can get hit if you are positioned too far to the right. Especially once he transforms into a beast, his attacks can actually clip through the stairs, meaning that you can still get hit. So it's best to stay a little to the left here, and then it's just a matter of patience.
What's that smell? The sweet blood. Oh, it sings to me. It's enough to make a man sick.
Alright, that wasn't a big deal, right? The run is almost halfway done already. Well, not really, it's just the beginning. And as I said, you cannot cheese all of the bosses. So as you may have noticed, I have the Hunter's Mark equipped, which you can't use that often given that you're mostly progressing forward. But there are actually some cases where you can make use of lanterns even though you cannot visit the Hunter's Dream. Because if you merely light a lantern, then you can use the Hunter's Mark to fast travel to the last lantern you have lit. So that's what we're going to do here in Cathedral Ward. I'm going to light that lantern so that after killing the blood-starved beast, I can immediately get back here using the Hunter's Mark. After all, you have no use for blood echoes anyway, so you can safely sacrifice them. But as I said, you are mostly progressing forward, so there are only a handful of lanterns that are actually worth lighting. In fact, basically only two. Namely this one and one in Yahar'gul. Well, technically I also used one in the forest, but that wasn't planned. That was because I took the wrong route, but you will see that later on. So I picked up the hunter's outfit because your starting clothes have the lowest defense in the game. And other than defense, these clothes also help you filling up your beast blood meter faster. So that is very, very helpful. Because beast blood is absolutely 100% essential in this run. And to sound like a broken record, because I have said this in so many of my videos, I hate dogs in video games. So this part sucks pretty hard. If you're not careful here and get comboed by these dogs, the run can actually end here already. But we need to make it past here since we need to talk to Alfred for fire paper and because we need to get to the blood-starved beast. As in this run, that boss is actually mandatory. After all, we cannot open the gate to Vicar Amelia without going to the Hunter's Dream. So instead we're going to kill the blood-starved beast so that the door in Odin Chapel will open, meaning that we can take that route instead. Not to mention that I basically always do that, and you probably do that as well. Now for some reason these dogs cannot get through the door here, so we are shamelessly going to make use of that. And then I'm going to essentially speed run through old Yharnam trying to avoid all the enemies, but picking up specific items on the way to the boss, namely antidotes, pungent blood cocktails, 2 sets of blood vials, some extra fire paper and the first set of beast blood pellets. Have I mentioned already that doing a challenge run like this is bad for your heart? Well, moments like these are basically why. Things just don't always go as planned. And the further along in the run you are, the more likely it is for such moments to give you a freaking heart attack. Alright, here to the left is the first time you can pick up beast blood pellets, in fact 6 of them, so that's a nice amount. However, this means having to make it back past several werewolves and that can be rather tricky. And keep in mind that there is one jumping through the door leading to the shortcut. By the way, if you want to risk it, up the stairs in that building is some extra fire paper. But I immediately continued on towards the blood-starved beast. However, keep in mind that just like beast blood, fire and bolt paper are extremely valuable as well. You will want to do anything to increase your damage output, especially near the end of the game. Okay, so the Blood-Starved Beast is not a difficult boss, but normally you would have a +3 weapon, which does make quite a bit of a difference. So what I'm going to do here is to lure the boss into the corner using a pungent blood cocktail to get some free hits in to build up my beast blood meter. Unfortunately, I'm doing pretty bad in this fight and I miss a lot of opportunities to get hits in. It is in fact possible to trap the boss into the corner and just completely build up your beast blood meter, draining his health really quickly, but that is not what happened here unfortunately. and I took a hit. So that can be rather scary because of the poison. Now it's important to not panic, because if you use an antidote at the wrong time, you will not be able to move, and that can mean getting hit again, which is likely to mean death. Moreover, when he sprays poison everywhere, it's likely that you will get poisoned automatically. But in the end, it's just really important that you at least don't use too many blood vials, as those are just really, really valuable. Okay, so that did not go that well, but at least I still have 18 blood vials left. So as I said before, because I lit the lantern in Cathedral Ward, I can now use the Hunter's Mark, that way I don't have to run all the way back. And to emphasize again, because of the nature of this run, you will want to be able to make it through the first parts as quickly as possible. Because every time you need to reset, you need to do all of this all over again, to make it back to where you happen to die in that failed attempt. Anyway, so now the Bloodstarved Beast is dead, the door in Odin Chapel has opened, giving us a way to make it past the closed gate. And after that, it's immediately time for the next boss fight. We're going to have to go through here later on anyway, so let me just open up the gate. However, that will aggro the two enemies nearby, so it's best to go the other way around. And close to the large church giant you can find a set of 6 blood vials, so it's vital to pick those up. This way we have our maximum of 20 blood vials again. As you may know, you don't have to worry about the two enemies in front of the cathedral, because if you just keep running, they won't attack you before you are in the animation where you open up the door. And that means not being able to get hit. You know, unlike Dark Souls 2. And then it's time for what's essentially the pinwheel of Bloodborne. However, you need to be a bit more careful given that your weapon is unupgraded. But regardless, if you just break each of her limbs in succession, you can still almost keep her stun locked for the entire fight. Run up to Amelia's right arm and use L1 attacks until it breaks. Then move on to the right leg to make her stagger. But as I said, my weapon is unupgraded, so Amelia actually managed to counterattack. Yeah, isn't that unusual to see? After the visceral, you can attempt to break her face as well. Unfortunately, she got out of the way in time. So instead, you can just do the same thing you did to her left limbs as you did to her right arm and leg. And just as a general rule, applicable to both the saw spear and the saw cleaver, transform attacks rapidly fill up your beast blood meter. So basically this entire run just consists of constant L1 attacks. Alright then, now before making our way to the forest, we need to get some bolt paper, which you can get by killing the hunter NPC to the side of the cathedral. Specifically the one with the tonitrus. You don't want to mess with the one wielding the rifle spear. Okay, there we got some bolt paper. An extremely valuable item. In fact, at the end of the game, I only had a single one to spare. So you have to make count what you can get your hands on. Now, before immediately getting to the forest area, we are going to make another little detour, namely to pick up poison knives. Because those we are going to need to cheese Micolash during his second phase, and the ones remaining will greatly help us out during the fight against Mergo's wetnurse, to do some extra passive damage in the background. Alright, so the Forbidden Woods is a very important area to gather some specific items. We're going to need to collect the maximum amount of beast blood pellets, some blue elixirs, 10 Molotov cocktails, and preferably some blood vials so that we can face the shadows of Yharnam with 20 vials. Unfortunately, you're going to see me take the wrong route, meaning that I missed some required beast blood. So when I realized that, I used a shortcut to make it back to the start of the forest. But because I almost got killed multiple times, I panicked and used the hunter's mark too early, meaning that I missed the extra blood vials as well. And my run through this area was already very messy, and I wound up using way too much blood vials even before that point. So the following section is a complete clusterfuck, unfortunately. Okay, so here to the right is where I forgot to pick up the beast blood. It can be found in that small building, so as I said, I had to come back for it later. Actually, there was also a collection of beast blood pellets beyond the gate, but I didn't pick those up either. Anyway, so in the building next to where the dogs are, some blue elixirs can be found. And I'll be using one of those in Byrgenwerth to avoid having to deal with the scholar. You know, the one that uses Call Beyond. However, speaking of Rom, the boss of Byrgenwerth, we're also going to pick up a collection of 10 Molotov cocktails. And I'll explain why those are so important during that boss fight. But the problem, as you can probably already guess, is that now we have dogs on our trail. So this is where things are starting to go south, quite rapidly. Keep running here so you won't get a cannonball in your face, and then you'll find some beast blood in a shed to the left. And here I almost got killed again. It's really important to keep it cool in a run like this, because if you panic, you are simply going to stack mistake upon mistake. In fact, I even do that without panicking. So at this point I realized I only had 8 beast blood pellets, which is not enough. If you run out when you get to Mergo's wetnurse, you are completely 100% fucked. So I decided to take the shortcut back to the start of the forest. As you may have guessed by now, there is a reason why I don't do actual speed runs. Okay, so now I fuck up in the worst possible way. As you see, I only have 9 blood vials left, so my idea was to light the lantern, quickly grab the beast blood in the shed I told you about earlier, and use the hunter's mark to get back to that lantern. But I used so many blood vials that I now desperately needed the set of blood vials that can be found a little further past the gate. But I'm an idiot, and after almost getting killed so many times, and with enemies on my trail, I used the hunter's mark too early. Meaning no extra blood vials. Okay, so now I only have 9 blood vials to fight both the shadows of Yharnam as well as Rom the Vacuous Spider. Which is not good. So I at least tried to get 1 extra from the enemy here, but I was out of luck. So what I should have done is to just go and get the extra set of blood vials that I should have got in the first place. But then you assume that I'm not a complete fucking idiot sometimes. Instead, I was like, yeah, fuck it, let's just go and fight 3 bosses at once with an unupgraded weapon, hoping that I won't go through my blood vials like a homeless man through cheap liquor. Yeah, it's not really a smart move. Fortunately, there's a boar near the shadows, and that one always drops 2 blood vials, so that is something at least. In case you ever felt lost here in the woods, the route is actually extremely straightforward. Just follow the road and don't take any side turns. Simple as that. Alright, this boss fight is the toughest part of the entire run, at least for me. Remember that we have 3 bosses at once, your character isn't leveled, you have no gun to parry, and your weapon is unupgraded. So my strategy is as follows. I only focus on one of the shadows at once, and specifically the one with the tonitrus first, and the one with the candle last. There are a couple of reasons for that order. First, it's to get rid of the one who is constantly spamming projectiles from a distance as soon as possible. Secondly, that one has the least amount of health. And thirdly, it's easiest to separate that one from the other 2, because it's the least aggressive one. He's actually trying to stay away from you. And fourthly, that one is actually weak to fire, whereas the other 2 are weak to bolt. And for the rest of the run, bolt paper is more important than fire. Regardless, the most difficult part of this fight is that you need to be aggressive to keep your beast blood meter high, but because your health is so low and you fail the entire run if you die, you would actually like to be careful and take your time. So, this boss is a run killer. Ah, come on, that is a dick move. His life bar is empty and he is still alive. And this is precisely what you want to avoid. Having to fight all 3 of them when they are transformed. Fortunately, when you kill the one with the tonitrus, you can focus on the one that's wielding only a sword. And then it can actually be beneficial to lock on, so you can do dashes rather than rolls. In the first phase that's not a good idea, because you need more freedom to move around. Now it is important to merely focus on the one that's not holding a candle, because what you absolutely want to prevent is the final phase where they can summon snakes from the ground. And there's a way to prevent that, because if you leave the one with the candle for last, if you simply keep walking towards him doing a single attack, this will lock him into doing constant sidesteps. So then, regardless of how low your damage is, it's merely a matter of patience. Okay, so that takes care of the shadows, but now I only have 2 blood vials left for the fight against Rom. Well, isn't that fucking great? Yeah, that's the nature of a run like this. If you make mistakes early on, you will suffer for it later. Fortunately, it's only a short way to the next boss, but as you know, there's a really dangerous NPC there as well who can one-shot you with a call beyond. So I'm going to use a blue elixir to make it less likely that she will attack me from behind. After all, you need a key to open the door to Master Willem, and that means you will aggro that hostile NPC on your way past the door to the ladder where the key can be found. Okay, and for the billionth time, I make another mistake that almost cost me the run. I needed to use a second blue elixir, because now it's going to wear off, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the strategy in the first place. Okay then, I barely made it and I still have to face this boss with only 2 blood vials. Now remember that I did at least pick up the Molotov cocktails and the oil urns. Those are going to be of vital importance for the third phase of this fight. Now this fight is difficult, but not so much mechanically, more in the sense that it's a test of patience and endurance, because it's a long fight. You absolutely need to take out all of the small spiders first, in all 3 phases, and that kinda wears you down. Especially because you constantly need to wait for the right opportunity, when it's actually safe to attack. Now you may be aware of ways to one-cycle Rom, or at least skip one of the phases, but with an unupgraded weapon that's simply not possible. Because even with a maxed out beast blood meter, your damage is still pretty low. And I already used one of the 2 blood vials, and this is merely the first phase. Have I mentioned already that doing a run like this is bad for your heart? Once all the small spiders are dead, Rom will still have no attacks until the second phase. So it's a bad idea to use any items here. Just be patient. Alright, second phase. So now we have to kill all those small spiders all over again. But now, each time Rom raises her head, you need to keep running to dodge the arcane meteor rain. As long as you are running, those will always land behind you. However, this makes it even more tedious to take out all the small spiders, because now you have to constantly have your sights on Rom to see the meteors coming, which applies to the ones coming from the ground as well. But fortunately the depth zones are very clearly telegraphed in that move. Okay, so now the boss is no longer completely passive, so you have to be careful. You need to get the fuck out of the way as soon as she does her AoE explosion. You will really be cleansing your butt cheeks at this point. Alright, third phase. It's completely the same as the second one as far as the smaller spiders are concerned. However, as soon as only Rom is left, it's no longer safe to attack her, because at any time she can now do a sort of melee attack where she goes berserk and stomps all around, or whatever you want to call it. So for the final part I will be using the oil urns and Molotov cocktails so I can stay at a distance. And there goes my final blood vial. You wouldn't believe how much sweat there was in my butt crack at this point. Okay, so as I said, just finish the fight using oil urns and molotovs. And make sure not to miss, because you need all of them. What the hell? My code glitched out or something. Okay, this is some interesting fashion born at least. Alright, that takes care of Rom, but now I don't have any blood vials. In fact, I don't even have a full life bar. And that's not a good thing. But at least there is a way to get a full life bar. You know the place where you are transported to after the cutscene? That actually counts as a checkpoint, so if you use the hunter's mark, you'll actually respawn there. So that will at least give me a full life bar, but I still don't have any blood vials. So this is a pretty scary part in the run. Fortunately, there's a location where you can pick up 8 blood vials all at once. However, we're going to have to make it there without getting clipped by an enemy. And there are several of them with guns, and right before those blood vials are a bunch of dogs. So my crack wasn't actually getting any drier. Okay, I lighted the lantern here because there is one final time we can make use of the hunter's mark. Because for the fight against the One Reborn, I'm going to use the nitrous. However, there will be tons of enemies chasing me as soon as I pick it up. So to save myself, I will use the hunter's mark one final time to transport back to this lantern. Of course, it is important to open up the shortcut first. Otherwise you will have to go through this entire section all over again. Okay, so now the shortcut is open, I can safely... Ah! What the fuck? God damn it, this just sums up From Software games. The whole world just wants you dead. Anyway, so now I can make a run for the Tonitrus and then transport back to the lantern. And as you would expect, I almost got myself killed again. Alright, the One Reborn has a fuck ton of health, so even with the Tonitrus, the mere fact of it being at +0 makes it simply unfeasible to do this boss legitimately. Fortunately, there is a way to cheese this boss. However, it's not one where you are 100% safe. You can still take hits, and in fact I do take hits. So it works as follows. Just run past the boss and go up the stairs. Then you can ignore all the bell maidens. You simply need to get the boss's attention, and that's the most dangerous part. But eventually he will continue to attack you even when you are close to the stairs, which causes his attacks to clip through the wall, and that gives you the opportunity to hit him, while more or less being at a safe location. However, it's not completely safe, and that's very important to realize. So what you need to do is to move towards the wall to bait an attack, and then move backwards to see what he does. If you're lucky, he will poke his head through the wall, or what you could call his head at least, because that one takes extra damage. But what you constantly need to be looking out for is his sideways swipe attack, because that can actually hit you. Therefore, keep an eye on the doorway to see that attack coming. Another thing is that if you get too greedy, you can move too far forward when attacking, and then you will take damage simply for touching him. But in the end, it's all a matter of patience, because this takes a while. So let me speed up the footage a bit. So here's where I got greedy and took a hit. Not too smart, because I still don't have a lot of blood vials. Between 50% and 30% of his health, the boss enters his second phase and he will make blood and gore rain out of nowhere above you, so you will have to move all the way down the stairs to avoid it. Moreover, he can also do an AoE attack, which is telegraphed by a scream, and that one can actually clip all the way through the wall. So if you are too close, that can kill you. Other than that, the fight continues the same way. Okay then, only 2 bosses more to go. So close, yet still so far away from our goal, because there are some dangerous areas left. It's a bit scary to have to slow down, but it's essential to pick up these blood vials over here, because it's a set of no less than 8 vials. And then it's all about running. Run fast and be wary of everything around you. Those wolf kind of creatures can jump great distances, and those giant rocks are going to be one that kills, as you would expect. Fortunately, you can get out of the frenzy-inducing area rather quickly. Wow, imagine finding a spider like that in your bathtub. Just keep running, because those smaller spiders will start chasing you. Then you need to make it past a hunter NPC, and another enemy will be blocking the doorway behind him. So you need to push a bit to make it past that enemy. And then just keep going, because that hunter will also start following you. However, it's also essential to pick up one more beast blood pellet behind a set of mirrors. So there's a lot of pressure on you at this point. Especially because we're so far in the run already.
Some say cosm. Do you hear our prayers? No, we shall not abandon the dream. No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
Okay then, time for Micolash. Now the problem during the first phase is not so much Micolash himself. It's the respawning skeletons you don't want to have to deal with. So the strategy here is to not fight the boss in the room where he eventually runs into, but in the hallway right before that. However, since there is one of those skeletons too close by for that to work, I'm going to lure that skeleton down the stairs and kill it there. It will respawn, but it won't get aggroed again as long as I'm fighting Micolash inside that hallway.
As you once did for the vacuous Rom.
Luring him into this hallway works in a rather peculiar way. If you stand in the hallway, Micolash will stop right on the edge. But if you then move backwards, he will walk into the hallway and then you can trap him in the corner. The annoying thing though is that even with a full beast blood meter, your damage output is pretty pathetic. Fortunately, he only has one attack, but if you get greedy or if you get stuck by walking sideways right next to the wall, because it has small crevices, you will not be fast enough to get out of the way. Also, make sure that he doesn't walk out of the hallway, because luring him back in wastes both your beast blood meter and it may trigger one of the skeletons to come in.
Majestic! A hunter is a hunter, even
Over here are the final blood vials you can pick up. Fortunately, there are 8 of them. And now for the second phase, we have the opportunity to cheese Micolash. Which is actually good, because he's a bitch. However, this is very important. You can only cheese him if he jumps down to the bottom floor. If he uses the mirror to teleport there, you need to chase him around until he moves back up and jumps down. Otherwise the poison knife trick doesn't work. Yeah, I learned that the hard way. Because he will simply disappear and not get poisoned instead of getting into this constant cycle of disappearing and reappearing while his health is draining away because of the poison. It takes 2 knives to poison him, and when he eventually dies you will have 12 left. Which is good because Mergo's wetnurse needs 4 knives to get poisoned. So if you don't miss, you can poison her 3 times. Which should drain about half a life bar. Okay, now things are getting tense. Only one boss left to go, with the possible exception of Josefka's blood vial next to the elevator. Which I didn't, but it's smarter to have it as a backup in case you happen to run out of blood vials against the boss. Alright, time for the finale. Mergo's wetnurse may not be the toughest boss in the game, but under these restrictions it's a different story. To emphasize again, small life bar, unupgraded weapon, sweat running down your butt crack. A very important thing is to poison her, because that does tons of passive damage in the background. Other than that, you need to be aggressive to keep your beast blood meter up. The annoying thing though is that when she does that lawnmower move, yes, it is safe right behind her, but that's a rather precise location, so it's easy to get clipped. Moreover, if you get hit, you can get stunned for a second, and that will likely means death with such a short life bar. But as you would expect, the absolute worst part of this fight is when she summons the clone. Now, you may not even be aware of this, but the first time she does this, it's only a single clone. And under other circumstances, you will probably kill her before she can do it the second time. But not in this case. And the second time she does it, there are two clones, and therefore they are much harder to avoid. My strategy is to keep running in circles around the arena. Most of the clone's attacks will go behind you, and if she appears in front of you, you can at least see the attacks coming. But of course, stamina management is key, because if you slow down at a bad time, it is all over. A lot of the clone's attacks will be one-hit kills, not all fortunately, but it's a really scary part of the run. As you can see, this charge attack can actually be iframed. It's of course safer to get behind her, but that's not always possible. Okay, the first time the arena goes purple, it actually takes a while before the clone shows up, so you can get some extra damage in before you start running. Of course, don't get greedy. You definitely want to play things safe at this point. Holy shit! That gave me a fucking heart attack. Have I mentioned yet that doing a run like this is bad for you? Well, you get the point, I think. It sucks pretty hard that I missed one of the poison knives, because the remaining 3 are not enough to poison her a third time. Okay, so as I said, there are now 2 clones instead of 1. So this part is even scarier than before. By the way, if you are really lucky and you manage to stagger the boss when she summons that purple haze, you actually prevent this phase of the fight. But that requires a lot of favorable RNG. Fuck, I'm getting so many close calls. If you wonder why the fuck I'm not healing, well, when? When is a safe time to heal? Oh my fucking god, she does it the third time. Have I mentioned already that besides being bad for your heart, doing a run like this causes severe amounts of crying in the shower? Okay, final beast blood pellet, 2 bolt papers left, and 5 more blood vials. Okay, final hit. Don't die now. Ah. You know, to quote Sergeant Sykes from the movie Jarhead, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for I'm the baddest motherfucker in the goddamn valley." And that's it. After the baby stops crying and Nightmare Slain appears, that is how far you can go without visiting the Hunter's Dream. So all that is left is to finally wake up there and see the special cutscene and then have Gehrman chop my head off, even though it's the first time we even meet. Yeah, you know, come to think of it, this may have been a bit too much trouble just for a little change in a small cutscene. Huh. You know what? Before ending a no-death run by forcefully getting killed in a cutscene, let's get naked and roll through this field of flowers to celebrate. Basically the opposite of what you would do after killing the boss in a flower field in Snake Eater.
Good hunter, you've done what now you will do. You from the... Farewell, my keen hunter. Fear the blood.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Alright, so that was quite a tough playthrough. And this wasn't exactly my first attempt. I pretty much went hollow by having to reset this run over and over and over again. In fact, I initially wanted this to be my very first video on my channel, but I simply wasn't able to do it until now. It really is one of the harder challenge runs you can do in this game. Not the hardest, but definitely the hardest I'm willing to suffer through. However, as I've mentioned before, this will not be my only Bloodborne walkthrough on my channel, since I only covered parts of the game this way. So I probably will be doing a regular BL4 run covering all areas, bosses and the DLC at some point in the future. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure that you do, leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more.